Emperor Trajan takes the Roman Empire to its greatest extent, while Pliny the Younger and Cassius Dio show us around. Next we set sail for the beautiful Pyu States, and we meet the powerful eunuchs at the imperial court of Han China. Although Cassius Dio was a Roman senator, he was born in Nicaea, which in those days was a Greek city. He was also a great historian, known for his 80-volume Roman history, which covers almost 1,000 years of history. Political propaganda and historical facts can be hard to separate, as we saw with iconically evil emperors such as Caligula or Nero. But a violent earthquake followed by a devastating tsunami, which according to Cassius Dio occurred in 115 AD, has been confirmed by archaeological research. Dio's descriptions of this disaster, while colorful, are thus fairly accurate.
While the emperor was tarrying in Antioch, a terrible earthquake occurred. First there came, on a sudden, a great bellowing roar, and this was followed by a tremendous quaking. The whole earth was upheaved, and buildings leaped into the air. Some were carried aloft only to collapse and be broken in pieces, while others were tossed this way and that as if by the surge of the sea, and overturned, and the wreckage spread out over a great extent even of the open country. The crash of grinding and breaking timbers, together with tiles and stones, was most frightful. Even trees in some cases leaped into the air, roots and all. The number of those who were trapped in the houses and perished was past finding out, for multitudes were killed by the very force of the falling debris, and great numbers were suffocated in the ruins. Trajan made his way out through a window of the room in which he was staying. Some being, of greater than human stature, had come to him and led him forth, so that he escaped with only a few slight injuries, and as the shocks extended over several days, he lived out of doors in the hippodrome.
Emperor Trajan's miraculous escape in Antiochia must have been a bright spot in his otherwise not-so-great campaign in the Middle East. The emperor had arrived there in 113 AD to start a war against Rome's eternal rival, the Parthian Empire. Ultimately, he would not see Rome again. In the year 117 he fell ill and died on the way home. Trajan's fate brings to mind that of Alexander the Great, conqueror of the mighty Persian Empire 4 centuries earlier. This is no coincidence, for Trajan seems to have had a great admiration for Alexander. This may even have been a hidden motive for his campaign against the Parthian Empire. The official reason given, however, was that the new king of Armenia had been appointed, without first consulting Rome. Parthia itself was divided between Osiris I, who ruled the western parts including Mesopotamia, and Vologases III, who governed the east. Thus, in 114 AD, Trajan was able to seize control of Armenia. Without much resistance, he advanced further into Mesopotamia until he reached the Persian Gulf. If Cassius Dio is to be believed, this is also where Trajan recalls Alexander once again.
Then the emperor came to the ocean itself, and when he had learned its nature and had seen a ship sailing to India, he said, "I should certainly have crossed over to the Indi too, if I were still young." For he began to think about the Indi and was curious about their affairs, and he counted Alexander a lucky man. Yet he would declare that he himself had advanced farther than Alexander, and would so write to the Senate, although he was unable to preserve even the territory that he had subdued.
Indeed, holding on to the captured territories proved to be difficult. Especially when Jewish rebels took the opportunity to rise up against the Romans and destroy their temples in places like Cyprus and Egypt. The way Cassius Dio paints the Jewish people would certainly be considered extremely anti-Semitic today. Of course, the Jews weren't the only ones to be damned by the Romans. The Carthaginians, for example, went before them, not to mention the Celtic Druids. Antisemitism is sometimes called the longest hatred, as it can be traced back to Egyptian priest Manetho in the 3rd century BC. In 38 AD, thousands of Jews were killed in Alexandria, which harbored a large Jewish community. The city was named after its founder, Alexander the Great, which brings us to another association with Emperor Trajan, namely his homosexuality. In Greco-Roman culture, this wasn't necessarily an issue. In matters of sexual relations, society seemed to have been mostly concerned with preserving the hierarchies. A partner's social status might therefore be more important than gender or even age. Still, Trajan's lack of interest in the opposite sex did not go unnoticed. Cassius Dio, for instance, tells the story of a Syrian king who, fearing his arrival, manages to exploit Trajan's weakness.
Leaving garrisons at opportune points, Trajan came to Edessa, and there saw Abgarus for the first time. For, although Abgarus had previously sent envoys and gifts to the emperor on numerous occasions, he himself, first on one excuse and then another, had failed to put in an appearance, as was also the case with Manus, the ruler of the neighboring portion of Arabia, and Sporaces, the ruler of Anthemusia. On this occasion, however, induced partly by the persuasions of his son Arbandas, who was handsome and in the pride of youth, and therefore in favor with Trajan, and partly by his fear of the latter's presence, he met him on the road, made his apologies and obtained pardon, for he had a powerful intercessor in the boy. Accordingly, he became Trajan's friend and entertained him at a banquet, and during the dinner he brought in his boy to perform some barbaric dance or other.
Trajan was born in 53 AD in Italica, in present-day Spain. He was married to Pompeia Plotina, but although they seemed to have a very good relationship, the marriage remained childless nevertheless. Rising through the ranks, he eventually became the new emperor in the year 98. 3 years later, Trajan went to war with the various tribes of Dacia, largely corresponding to modern-day Romania. Domitian had gone before him but was only partially successful. Trajan did better, and to honor his triumph, a column was erected in Rome. It tells the story of his struggles against the barbaric kings, showing for instance Trajan's skills in building bridges and other structures. After initial success in 102, the war erupted again in 105 AD. A year later, Trajan achieved a final victory, and Dacia became the latest extension of the Roman Empire. Pliny the Younger was a lawyer, writer, and politician born in Como. Like Trajan, who wasn't even Italian, he was not from a patrician family. But they were more than wealthy enough to belong to the elite class of equites. Pliny was a nephew of the famous scientist Pliny the Elder. With his uncle, he shared a profound love for nature, philosophy, and writing. Pliny the Younger wrote hundreds of letters to his fellow Roman citizens, including Emperor Trajan. Some of those have been preserved, which allows us a glimpse into his daily life.
If you ask anyone, "What have you been doing today?" he will say, "I have been attending a coming-of-age ceremony. I was at a betrothal or a wedding. So-and-so asked me to witness the signing of a will. I've been acting as witness to A, or I've been in consultation with B." All these occupations appear of paramount importance on the day in question, but if you remember that you repeat the round day after day, they seem a sheer waste of time, especially when you have got away from them into the country. For then the thought occurs to you, what a number of days I have frittered away in these chilly formalities. That is how I feel when I am at my Laurentine villa and busy reading or writing, or even when I am giving my body a thorough rest and so repairing the pillars of my mind. The sea, the shore, these are the true secret haunts of the muses, and how many inspirations they give me, how they prompt my musings. Do, I beg of you, as soon as ever you can, turn your back on the din, the idle chatter, and the frivolous occupations of Rome, and give yourself up to study or recreation.
In his letters, Pliny the Younger shows a deep loyalty to Rome's written laws, but also to the all-important moral values that govern society, such as fides and amicitia, trust and friendship. As illustrated by his humorous letter to Septicius Clarus, a prefect of the Praetorian Guard.
What a fellow you are! You promised to come to dinner and then failed to turn up. Well, here is my magisterial sentence upon you. You must pay the money I am out of pocket to the last ass, and you will find the sum no small one. I had provided for each guest 1 lettuce, 3 snails, 2 eggs, spelt mixed with honey and snow. You will please reckon up the cost of the latter as among the costly of all, since it melts away in the dish, olives from Baetica, cucumbers, onions, and 1,000 other equally expensive dainties. You would have listened to a comedian, or a reciter, or a harp player, or perhaps to all, as I am such a lavish host. But you prefer to dine elsewhere, where I know not, off oysters, sows matrices, sea urchins, and to watch Spanish dancing girls.
Around 110, Pliny went to the province of Bithynia in modern-day Turkey, where he would die a few years later. He was sent as special envoy of the emperor to the Greek city-states in that region, which enjoyed a high degree of self-government. But apparently, a need for stricter oversight had arisen. Pliny reports directly to the emperor, with all due regards of course. In this correspondence, a variety of legal matters is discussed, ranging from punishments like exile, to cases around Roman citizenship. One letter contains Pliny's request to grant his friend, the famous historian Suetonius, use trium liberorum. These were special rights meant for those who had at least 3 children. But as a special honor, they were sometimes granted to others as well. Occasionally, freedmen are mentioned. As ex-slaves loyal to their former masters, they could obtain important administrative positions. It's no surprise that, especially when it comes to tax collection, Trajan is in favor of a strict enforcement of the law. But is also rather cautious when asked for more troops by local officials, perhaps with his military plans in Asia in mind. But Trajan wisely balances those interests with local customs and agreements, as well as general demands of fairness and common sense. Now that corruption is being countered, and more money should become available for public works, the poor state of public structures like aqueducts is discussed, and plans for reconstructions are made. Here too, Trajan keeps a close eye on the balance of costs and benefits. After a huge fire in Nicomedia destroyed several buildings, among which the Temple of Isis, Pliny requests permission to establish a fire brigade of 150 people. Here's Trajan's written answer.
You have conceived the idea that a guild of firemen might be formed in Nicomedia on the model of various others already existing. But it is to be remembered that your province of Bithynia, and especially city-states like Nicomedia, are the prey of factions. Whatever name we may give to those who form an association, and whatever the reason of the association may be, they will soon degenerate into secret societies. It is better policy to provide appliances for mastering conflagrations and encourage property owners to make use of them, and, if occasion demands, press the crowd which collects into the same service.
Trade flourished, and along the belts and roads of the immense Roman Empire, Christianity was gaining popularity. After originating as a purely Jewish movement at the beginning of the 1st century, the message became more and more spread among non-Jews. No doubt at the expense of the traditional Roman gods and goddesses. The Romans may also have projected their hatred of the Jews onto the early Christians. Either way, by now Christianity is forbidden by law. At least that's what Pliny's most famous letter to Trajan implies. In this epistle, he asks for Trajan's advice on the proper way to deal with those Christians. Pliny reports that even the countryside has now been infected, and that he hopes that a strict approach might still turn the tide. Nevertheless, Pliny finds it hard to see those kind-hearted, law-abiding Christians as criminals. And then there's the problem that more and more false accusations are being made, apparently as an easy way to get rid of some adversary. In Trajan's brief reply, he once again aims to strike the right balance.
You have adopted the proper course, my dear Pliny, in examining into the cases of those who have been denounced to you as Christians, for no hard and fast rule can be laid down to meet a question of such wide extent. The Christians are not to be hunted out. If they are brought before you and the offense is proved, they are to be punished, but with this reservation, that if anyone denies that he is a Christian and makes it clear that he is not, by offering prayers to our deities, then he is to be pardoned because of his recantation, however suspicious his past conduct may have been. But pamphlets published anonymously must not carry any weight whatever, no matter what the charge may be, for they are not only a precedent of the very worst type, but they are not in consonance with the spirit of our age.
Already during his lifetime, Trajan was called Optimus Princeps, the best emperor. From then on, every new emperor would be inaugurated saying, "Be more fortunate than Augustus, and better than Trajan." He is also known as the second of the 5 good emperors, who oversaw a period of prosperity and progress. Did we mention the trade routes? Midway to the Far East, we pause to admire the beauty of the Pyu city-states. A few centuries earlier, the Pyu peoples arrived in this region from the north to cultivate their rice fields. The language they spoke is related to modern-day Burmese, a member of the extended family of Sino-Tibetan languages. Ancient Indian Sanskrit was also in use, probably related to the trade relations cherished by the Pyu kingdoms. As well as Pali, the sacred language of the Buddhist scriptures that form the basis for Theravada Buddhism. Theravada, or the Way of the Elders, is the more traditional form of Buddhism, centered around the Buddha and his teachings. Today it's the main religion in this region, but as we move on to China, we will see more of Mahayana Buddhism, with its wealth of bodhisattvas. According to the Book of the Later Han, a king of Burma presented a group of acrobats from the Roman Empire to Emperor An of Han in 120 AD. When An of Han was installed as the new emperor in 106 AD, he was only 13 years old. Since then, the Empress Dowager Deng Sui was the de facto ruler of Han China. Although An's wife, Empress Ansi, seemed to exercise a lot of power from behind the scenes as well. Whether or not in various alliances with these women, the high-ranking eunuchs at the imperial court in Luoyang saw opportunities for their own positions of power as well. Eunuchs are castrated men who played more or less significant roles in various ancient cultures, like Persia and Rome. In ancient China, castration was used as punishment for adultery and indecent behavior. Not being able to produce offspring would probably make for a very low status. But at the imperial court, the eunuchs were valued precisely for this condition, as they could be better trusted with serving the many women and widows and would not cause any succession issues. To have a better chance of gaining such a position at the imperial court, young men were castrated before the age of 10, in order to prevent masculine features. But, besides the dangers of the operation itself, the hormonal imbalances that arise from it usually lead to serious health problems. As lower-ranking staff, eunuchs were also very much at the mercy of their masters. Yet, due to their direct access to the emperor, some of them managed to occupy very important government positions. Cao Cao, for instance, is a powerful eunuch who served during the Qin dynasty 300 years earlier. He is mentioned by Chinese philosopher Wang Chong in our final quotation.
The scholar officials pretend that sages are not born from human sperm, but that they are endowed with a special essence from heaven. The Shiking state that Yu and Si were born unnaturally, issuing from their mother's back. The statement of the Shiking that there was no rending and no tearing, so that the mother's body was not much affected may be true. but the assertion that U and C issued from their mother's back is irrational. When cicadas are born, they break forth from the back of the larvae. Did heaven in generating those sages follow the law of the larvae? In the world many persons die a sanguinary death by the sword, and it is not necessary that their first ancestor should have had an unnatural birth. When the Qin lost the empire, Yen Yu beheaded Hu Hai, and Xiong Yu executed Che Ying. Was the forefather of the Qin, Po Yi, born unnaturally? Ergo the thesis of natural and unnatural births based on the ancestors of the three dynasties is erroneous. See you in the next decade.